Hello, I'm Donna Skell.
And I'm Tiffany Ross.
Welcome to Roaring Lambs. Imagine this. You're out hunting with your brother, and all of a sudden you find yourself opposite an 8.5-foot, 600-pound grizzly bear who wants to eat you for lunch. Do you want to know more? Stay tuned.
This episode of Roaring Lambs is brought to you by LifeStoriesCompany.com.
Our guest today, Greg Matthews, is an amazing man. I don't want to mess up on his introduction because he has held every, what I call scary job that I can imagine. He's been a firefighter, he's been an emergency medical technician, he's been a special operations rescue technician, he's been a helicopter pilot, a fugitive recovery agent, a World Trade Center attack first responder, and today he works with anti-terrorism. He works with the U.S. government as an anti-terrorism officer. You're going to find out more about why Greg chose that kind of role for his life. He currently lives in Plano, Texas with Rhea, his wife of 17 years, and together they have 3 children. Welcome to Roaring Lambs. So glad to have you here, Greg.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
And I know this is a story, and all stories have a beginning. So your beginning is especially traumatic in a sense. So tell us a little bit about your early childhood years, your upbringing.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me here. It's an honor. I really appreciate it. So my family, pretty much from my great-grandfather on down, has served in the military. My dad was a California Highway Patrolman, and then also a United States Marine, and then worked for NCIS. And with that, my dad didn't, he really didn't know how to show his love for us. And so we figured out early on it was about making him proud and performing and all that. And so you know, whether it was baseball or whatever, we wanted to be the best because we wanted Dad to be proud of us. And when I was 8 years old, my hero, which has always been my dad, ended up coming outside and carrying some boxes and putting them in the car. And you know, we were playing wiffle ball out in the front yard and asking Dad, you know, what's going on, and he wouldn't say anything. And to make a long story really short, my parents had decided that they were going to be getting a divorce, and my dad was leaving the home. And it was, I can remember him leaving, my brothers were crying. At 8 years old, I really didn't know how to process it, other than the fact that I just figured that I must have done something so bad, or was just not, you know, lovable enough for my dad to stick around. And I can remember watching him drive away and hoping his tail lights, I could see them, you know, stopping and turning around, and the whole time I'm just saying, you know, don't leave, Dad, I'll be good, I promise. And I can remember that it was very, very, it was painful. So from that point on, I made a decision that one, if you can't trust Dad's not leaving, then there's not many people you can trust. I was never going to let anybody close enough to me like that again, and that I was going to prove to him that he was wrong, that I was worth sticking around for and loving, and just being the first son. It broke my heart.
So Greg, it breaks my heart as well, and I can relate in many ways because my dad left our family as well.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Literally told my brother at 12 years old, you're now the man of the family. It's just the cliche moment that actually happened. And my brother to this day still tears up about it. So I know that pain. I'm curious, did you have any type of spiritual foundation in your family? What was that environment like for you?
Well, no, there was no real spiritual foundation. My dad was not a believer, and neither was my mom. There was a couple of times that we had gone to Sunday school at Easter, you know, we had, you know, we moved around a lot after the divorce and all that stuff in different places, brought people into our lives that knew the Lord. I can remember a gentleman that bought us a Bible and had inscribed our names in it, and you know, I still have that today. So there was little pieces, but then my mom ended up getting saved after the divorce. She remarried, and I was literally just at 15, just a little hellion. And she said, because I was already planning on moving out at 15, and she said, well, if you're going to stay here, then you need to go to church. That's the one stipulation, and really didn't have any place to go, and so started going to church, and yeah, the Lord got a hold of me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you accept him then?
Yes,
at that
when I was in
time?
high school, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I accepted the Lord as my Savior, and what was tough about it is it all centered on a father, you know, and his son, and it was easier to swallow the part about a son, because I understood a son, but I had my own experiences with a dad, and it wasn't something that, so I held him at arm's length. I wanted it. I wanted that happiness. I wanted that joy. I wanted all that fulfillment, but it wasn't something that I could allow God to get really close as a dad, because that was just something that there was too much pain tied to that.
And as I described the kind of work that you sought out, I know in those jobs you were trying to kind of prove yourself to your dad who wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I talk about 60 seconds of, I speak a lot, and so I talk about 60 seconds of courage, and it applies to everybody, but mostly about men. If they can find someone that they can trust and talk about the deep shame and pain and guilt that you feel with another person, there's a lot of healing if you're willing to press into that pain, but it's getting people to that point. And so me sharing about what I've done, so there's obviously a father wound there. I didn't know it at 8 years old. You know, I had spoke those things on my life, and that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I was going to prove to the world and to my dad that I was worth loving and sticking around for. And so I started off with just doing the baseball thing for my dad, and then at 17 I became a firefighter in the United States Air Force. I went on and did a full career in the fire service. Engine company, truck company, rescue company, doing all of that stuff. Worked at the World Trade Center attack for 3.5 weeks. You know, I did the hazardous materials. I was trained to be a helicopter pilot, and then became a rescue pilot. And each one of these things that I did, if you think about it, each one of those things should have been like the end, like I've arrived and here I am and I've proven myself. But each time I did those things, it would only last for a little bit. I had to do something greater or more dangerous or more impactful, because I was trained. I was a patriot in a war. All my family had served this country. And I knew I wanted to do that, but the mistake I made is I allowed what I was to become who I was. And
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really
it
good.
was, yeah, it wasn't always like that. I didn't always know that. It took a grizzly getting a hold of me to bring that home in God's wonderful ways that He does things, right? You know?
That is pretty amazing, all that excitement in your work, especially the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the end of the excitement, because as you mentioned, you had an experience very few people have ever had when you came face to face with that grizzly.
Right.
Tell us the whole story.
You want to hear the
Yeah.
whole story. Well, I think it's important where I frame this is understanding that God uses all things to bring about what His will is, because we're so flighty in the things that we do and have a hard time a lot of times staying consistent with stuff. So what I want to say is it was a perfect point in my life where God just was saying, you know what, it's time to really get a hold of Greg, and I want him to know how much I love him. And I know it's hard to combine a grizzly attack with how much God loves you, but He did use a whale, right?
That's right.
You know, He used
Yeah.
a bunch of lions. I mean, He's used animals in the
Yeah.
past. So, my brother and I had dreamt of doing a big game hunt in Alaska. My dad and had trained us all our lives as far as fishing and hunting and outdoors and all that manly stuff, and we wanted to test ourselves out in the Alaskan wilderness. So my brother has 5 kids, and they eat a lot, and that's how he feeds the kids, is basically put stuff in the freezer. So I'm not a trophy hunter, but I do like hunting, I do like being in the outdoors. And when he said that we could go on a 10-day hunt into remote Alaska, just him and I, it was like, yes, I want to go. So fast forward, we're 4 days into a 10-day hunt. We're about 18 miles in by boat, and then we're packed in about 2 miles. Getting out of the boat that morning, I mean, if you can imagine look at any Alaska calendar and just picture 2 mountain ranges
Yes.
in, you know, just coming up on fall. It's got the river in the middle, it's got the trees, it's got the mountain. It's the most pristine thing that I have ever seen, looking at it, hiking in. But little did I know that same valley would be called the Valley of Blood between my brother and I. And so we ended up packing up into this about 2 miles, and I was at the front of a knoll. I was fully camouflaged up, and I was going to be hunting with a bow, and we were hunting for bull moose. So we're going to make it fair. You know, anybody can shoot anything with a rifle. I wanted to have to really work to be able to do this and move forward to do that. And so about 3 hours into him calling, he's about 50 to 60 yards behind me. I sense some movement. I turn, draw the bow back, expecting to see a moose. And what I saw, as you explained, was an 8.5 foot, 600-pound grizzly. It was standing on its back legs, and its head was in the air, and it was sniffing the air, just like this. Just sniffing. And I could tell right away that bear was looking for something and had come this far, being only 35 yards away from me, that thing was looking for me. And so I felt all the blood drain from my face. I wasn't sure what to do. I thought about running, and that's probably the worst thing you could do, so I quickly discarded that. There was a big log in front of me. There was a hole underneath it. I thought, it doesn't look quite big enough for me, but I could probably shove myself into that hole. I was so scared. But then I realized, looking where the bear was at the confluence of 2 trails, and that second trail would have taken the bear down to where my brother was. So I made a decision to grab my rifle, I put the bow down, and I was going to confront. So I got on my hands and knees, and I crawled around a tree, and I was holding the rifle, just praying. And I came around, and I brought the rifle up. I couldn't see through the scope, so I just lowered it down to my hip, stood on my tiptoes and broadened my shoulders, and I said, "Whoa, bear." And all of a sudden that bear's head snapped right to me, locked eyes with me, never lost eye contact with me, dropped down to all fours, and then the head slowly started to sink just like this. And those black eyes just looking straight at me, the ears folded back, the hair came up on its back, and a big muscle came out of the top of his head, and it started to charge me. So at about 20 yards, I thought for certain it was going to be a false charge. It didn't stop. At about 10 feet, I fired right in its face. It didn't do anything. It lunged at me with its mouth open. The only thing, I couldn't rack another round quick enough. So the only thing I had was the rifle, so I stuck the rifle up, and the barrel caught somewhere in the bear's mouth, but it kicked the rifle back, and the rifle hit me right in the head. It knocked the bear off balance, and then it just slammed me to the ground, slid right over the top of me. And while I'm sitting there on my back trying to catch my breath and wondering what in the world just happened, two massive paws landed on my shoulders, pinning me to the ground, and then the first bite was right to my face. I don't know if you can see it, but so there was a tennis ball size hole taken out of my throat, and then my face was split from here to here all the way down. And that was just the first bite. So my face exploded with blood. I couldn't see. My brother later on said the noises that I was making, he said it didn't sound human, it sounded like an animal dying. And so after the first bite, I felt the rush of blood in my throat, and I knew that warmth that was going down my chest was a lot of blood, and so I spun my head to the side to try and put pressure on my neck, which exposed the back of my head, and that's when the grizzly took my whole head in its mouth and began to bite down. And that really hurt. So when it started biting down, it felt like a vice, and it felt like hot iron pokers just driving into my head. I couldn't see, so I began to feel at what was, what I could find, and I found the bear's nose right here. And so keep in mind, the bear's head's about like this big.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, so the snout's like this, and I began to punch that bear literally right in the nose, and it was just a reactive thing, trying to survive. I mean, I was fighting for my life at this point. So, boom, boom, boom. About the fourth hit to the nose, as quick as it had grabbed my head, it grabbed my arm, hole punched my arm, bit all the way through my arm, and then stood up and basically gave a violent head shake, and then threw me about 10 or 12 feet from where I was. At that point, I landed on my face. I spun around. I couldn't see. I was sitting on my bottom and with my knees up, and I was trying to, with only my ears, trying to figure out where this thing was. And I was convinced that it was off to my left, and then I felt the breath, and then I felt the growl again right here at my right ear, and that's when it grabbed my head again. So it pinned me to the ground, trying to basically crush my skull. It went to release, and then I spun around onto my belly, and the only thing that I could think of was to interlace my fingers over my neck, my C-spine, to spread my elbows and to spread my legs, and just to keep it from getting me on my back again. That's the only thing I could think of. And so I got into that position. I heard it come around me, step over, and it was basically just towering over the top of me. It reached one of its paws underneath my ribs and tried to roll me with its claws, and then I just got right back into that position. So I think that started to irritate the bear, and so it sunk its teeth down into my lat and basically picked me up about 4 feet off the ground and then dropped me. And I just, screaming, I just quickly got back into that position. And then finally it had, I'm sure, I couldn't see it because I was on my face, but I'm sure it had enough at that point, because I felt it move right over me, I could hear it right above me, and then it took one of its paws with about a 4-inch claw and started from the top of my ear with a big swat to my head, and then raking down, and it degloved my whole scalp and basically just flopped it over. That really, really hurt. That was one of the things that was so excruciating. And there was nothing really brave going on here. I was just trying to survive. So at that point, that wasn't working, interlacing my fingers. So here I am, I'm back on my bottom. I'm trying to figure out where this thing is. And the only thing it hasn't gotten is my legs. And so I hear something over to the left, and I began to kick as hard as I can. And I struck the bear once with a kick, but then the second kick, it caught my leg right below the knee and began to bite down on my leg. At this point, there is something going on because I'm hearing my brother's voice coming up finally. And but it comes up and then it fades away, and as it comes up, I can feel more pain because I can feel the bear's head turning. And he said the first time the bear turned to him with my leg in its mouth when he was charging it, and the reason he was charging it is the bear was right in front of me, so he couldn't shoot it without possibly shooting me. So he made a decision to actually come and charge the bear to get it to turn. He said when the bear looked at him with my leg in its mouth, its whole head was completely covered in blood, and he said it looked like I was unconscious, but I wasn't unconscious. I was feeling every little thing. So that's the extent of the attack, but what I want to say is that the story, that's not even the most exciting part of the whole story.
I know.
So moving from this point, my brother ends up getting the bear to turn on him. He shoots it twice as it's running at him. Finally, the bear looks at me, looks at him, and goes off into the woods. And at this time, I'm on all fours. Blood is pouring out of my neck. I've got my head on the ground because if I turn sideways, the blood runs down into my airway. This is the only way I can breathe. And I really honestly feel like I'm drawing my last breath. At this point, I gotta say it would probably be the same for a man and or a woman. But for a man, for me, and how shallow my life had been, and you know, I said what I was became who I was. Well, I came face to face with the fact that all the things that I had given my heart over to, that I had given all of my passions and pursuits to, were temporal things that didn't last. That when I was staring death in the face, it didn't give me any purpose or fulfillment or anything like that. And at that point, I remember crying even harder because not only was I physically dying, but I had failed, that I was dying spiritually too. That I had never given God a chance to even get close, that I had been chasing all these different things that really amounted to nothing. They were good things, but when you're created for certain things and you don't fill those things with, you know, with all the right things, I was just empty. And so I can remember crying out to God. And at that point, I literally heard these words from God. He said, "Greg, you are my son. I love you. I'm not done with you. And I need you to fight." And what was hard about that is because I had done nothing to deserve him showing up as a dad. All my dad and the images of my dad are walking away when I needed him most. And so hearing him say that and knowing that immediately after that he gave me a vision of my family with them holding their arms out saying, "Daddy, come back to us." And he just didn't even stop there. I can remember seeing my daughter coming forward and holding her arms out and saying, "Daddy, we love you, but if you're going to come home to us, you have to fight." And it was one of the most powerful things that, and it doesn't stop there with what the Lord did, because what he ended up doing was not only saving me physically, but showing me my shortcomings in a way that a father shows his son those shortcomings, in love, and what a real father is, and that basically showing me that the lies that I've been telling myself about my dad was exactly that, lies. Those were all things of the enemy that I had put on my life for my entire life. So not only did he save me physically, but he saved me. He saved my heart. He saved me spiritually.
How long was that attack, Greg?
The physical attack was, I was mauled for over 2 minutes. So yeah, my arm, my back, my neck, my face, 6.5 hours of reconstructive surgery and 300 stitches just to get everything kind of back into place.
And God somehow, through the visions of your family and all of that, gave you the strength to somehow walk away with there bit by bit with your brother, getting to safety.
Well, they were 2 miles out
Yeah,
from
we were 2 miles out.
So
I want to cover everything. I don't want to miss anything. So what I will tell you is, after God gave me that vision, and he began to restore me in the worst traumatic event in my life, and he also allowed my mind to clear, and for what I had trained everyone says it's almost like you trained your whole life for that one situation to get you. Well, God probably orchestrated it like that. So my brother, I told him, I said, I can't see the wounds, because he kept yelling at me, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. And so I said, move in front of me and raise up, or I'll raise up, and then you describe the injuries, and then I'll tell you how we can fix it. And so he got in front of me and he raised up, and all of a sudden he says, oh my God. And it was like, what? That's the last thing you say to a patient. Yeah, he doesn't know, but you don't say that. Oh my. And I said, what? He says, well, you have a huge hole in your throat. And I said, okay, we'll go ahead and start there. And so I had him, we were wearing these special ops wraps on our heads, shamogs. And I said, hand me one of those. And I spun it into a kind of a hasty bandage and put it in his hand. And I basically explained to him that, hey, you got to hold pressure on one side, kind of on the other side, because if you don't, then I'll just pass out and you have to end up carrying me out of here. So he was holding pressure to my neck. I said, okay, tell me, is there more? What are you seeing? And then I heard that, oh my, again. I'm like, what? He's like, well, the whole back of your scalp is hanging off, and I can see your spine. And so I said, okay, well, is it still attached? And he said, yes. I said, well, okay, flop it back over, and then hand me that other shamog, and basically I spun that into a bandage. And with my left arm, because this arm it looked like somebody had put it in a vise with kind of a waveform, so it was just kind of hanging. So I was holding pressure with my left hand on the back of my head, and my brother was holding pressure on my neck. And so we were able to get the bleeding stopped for the most part, and then secure those bandages there. And then he wanted to carry me out. We were both shooting the same ammo, so he grabbed all my ammo out of my rifle, stuffed his pockets, grabbed his rifle. He said, I'm going to carry you out. I said, that thing is still alive. I said, we don't know if it's coming back, and I'm covered like a T-bone, walking through wolf and grizzly country. And so I told him, I said, hey, I'll walk, crawl, whatever I need to do. You got my six. This meaning you got my back. And he walked up trail and made sure that thing wasn't following us. And so, yeah, walking, crawling, I collapsed twice on the way out, and the vision was there, and I was like, I couldn't find the strength, and my brother would run down to me, and he would basically put his hand on my back, and he would raise his hand to the Lord and just pray over me. And it was, God would deliver a fresh amount of energy again to get up. My brother would pick me up, and he'd go back to watching the trail, and then I would just walk and crawl, and finally made it back to the boat.
I've heard your story probably 3 or 4 times, but I've just never been so engrossed in all the details, and just you tell it like a movie. I can just see it as you're sharing it, and I can't even imagine what it would feel like, where my head would be. I mean, I'm thinking of times in your story where you were in tuned enough to put your hands behind your back and to lie flat, and how the Lord just told you what to do
Absolutely.
every step of the way, because he knew he could use this story.
Yes.
So you eventually got back, got
Mhm.
into a hospital.
Yeah.
You said 6.5
6.5 hours
hours
of surgery.
300 stitches. They put you together again. You're a very handsome
Humpty
man.
Dumpty.
You
Yeah.
can't even tell. You can't even really see the
No.
scars if you hadn't pointed them out to me. It's amazing. But not only did God heal you physically, he healed you spiritually too. I can only imagine the expressions on your wife and your kids' face when they got to see you again, and
They had signs at the airport.
that were they probably a little bit frightened when
Oh,
they
they-
saw what
yeah.
you looked like
They were
before
absolutely frightened.
doctors put you back together again.
Yeah, it was, one of the things is my daughter had said to my wife that, and it was really hard. She said that she wasn't sure if she wanted to see her dad, just because she didn't want to see him all torn up. And so we had to have a phone call that between my daughter and I can remember going in the bathroom in the hospital and trying to do something to make me, and there was just not doing anything. And I can remember her FaceTiming, and I didn't want to put my face in the phone. And she had no idea how big of a part she played in me being rescued. You know, I hadn't even got to share that part of the story with her. But it was breaking my heart to think my daughter would look at me like a monster, you know. And so having that that FaceTime, the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, you don't look that bad, Daddy." And it just, there were so many gifts from the Lord along the whole path and the whole journey. The revelation of that I had another chance, because that's all I wanted was another chance to get back to my family and to make things right, because, you know, I had that revelation. And like I said, the things I did weren't bad. It's just it became, what I was became who I was, and I had no time, and I had robbed my family of that relationship, that I missed so many recitals and school plays and everything, because Greg wasn't okay unless he was achieving. And so I just wanted to get back to my family and wanted to invest in those relationships that I should have been doing. So from that point on, that's all I do now. I mean, I still work and still do my job, but it's much distant as far as priority and what I focus on and the healing, and it's still raw, but the healing's still going on. And I'm just so thankful to the Lord for allowing me to forgive my dad, understanding what a real father in heaven is like, and the depths and the lengths that God will go to because he loves you even beyond what you can even imagine. It's just such a powerful, powerful thing, and I love it.
I love the name of your ministry, Chase What Matters.
Right.
Yes.
So many years you chased what didn't matter.
didn't
Although God used it
He
to
did.
give you the wisdom and the information on how to protect yourself and the key to survival, and yet that's chasing what matters is really chasing the Lord. And,
Exactly.
Right. And He's given you a powerful ministry. He's taken your story. You've written a book, Chase
Yes,
What
ma'am.
Matters. It's an amazing book. You can see the picture of it on the screen, I'm sure. And you speak all over. And I'm sure that people hearing your story might like an opportunity to invite you to come and share that story at their church or their men's group or whatever. So we only have a minute or two left, but I want you to talk directly to the audience and tell them what matters and why.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, my book, Wild Awakening, is exactly what that was for me, and it was an awakening for my story, my brokenness, the revelation of how much God loved me and was willing to do for me, even though I was unable to do anything for myself. And I had pursued a lot of the things that I found out that really, really didn't matter. What really mattered was investing in those relationships with the Lord and my wife and my kids. And that's where real value in this world and purpose and fulfillment is. And people ask me, knowing where I'm at today in my relationship with the Lord and how much I've changed and the joy that I found in my life, would I ever have not gone through the Grizzly attack and not be brought to a point where I am today? And I would honestly have to say, if they were going to take everything that I have right here in my heart, how much I love the Lord, how much I love my family, and the perspective of fulfilling what I was created for, if they said that that was going to be taken away, that I would absolutely go through that Grizzly attack again. So I would encourage you to read Wild Awakening, because the Grizzly attack is not the most exciting piece here.
Right.
Greg, thank you so much for coming on our program. Your story is amazing. It's so captivating, and it's so inspiring to see how you've allowed God to use this incident to transform you, really,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
to give you perspective on what matters. And so for you today, if you want to be in touch with Greg, you want his book, go to chasewhatmatters.today, Greg Matthews, and you will not be disappointed. We are so glad that you joined us today at Roaring Lambs. And if you want to contact us, go ahead and contact us at info@roaringlambs.org. We are so blessed that you tuned in, and we pray that you chase what matters today. That's Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Choose Him today as your personal Savior, and go out and roar about the goodness of God.
At Life Stories Company, our passion is to preserve your story in a personal memoir. These beautiful books can be shared with both friends and family for generations. For the past 28 years, we have helped over 200 clients share their history and wisdom. As a Christian, what better testimony than to share how God has led you and provided for you? Visit us at lifestoriescompany.com. Sharing your story and honoring God, lifestoriescompany.com.